Hello, my name is Matthew, and I just read The Adventure of the Priory School by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is a part of my read along series and book club with Steve Donahue. We're reading murder mysteries in the month of March, and we're reading all of the Sherlock Holmes short stories. And I just talked about um, The Adventure of the Solitary Cyclist, and I made a point to say that it felt very realistic, but also smaller in scale. And straight away, the next short story that I read, The Adventure of the Priory School, is big and important, and it involves the royal family and aristocrats and big society, and the the case is very present, ongoing. There's a child abduction. Sherlock and Watson are actively pursuing a kidnapping that hasn't been resolved yet, and so the stakes are high. It feels intense and serious. This has a real dramatic, intense feel to it, and big. And I always love Sherlock and Watson being in the apartment, and then the entrance scene. And this one has just one of the grandest. I think Watson even says this was one of the more memorable scenes. And we have an aristocratic, very corpulent man burst into the room and then promptly pass out. So Sherlock and Watson have to run over, and now there's this like an unconscious, large man that they have to awaken and make sure that he's okay. And he's had a traumatic several days for reasons that are explained in the case, and also the travel weariness and sleeplessness, and he comes to and he asks for milk and a biscuit. And I also love that throughout this story, or these stories, obesity or being larger is still a symbol of wealth. So if you're a very large man, it's also just a subtle indicator that you're a very wealthy man for the time period. I think that's interesting. And then we get the next big thing. So we're going to have a duke. And for everything I know, it's just a fictional duke. It's a made up duke. And we get this big exposition, really letting the reader feel like this is a really important duke. This is one of the most famous, wealthy, well-to-do, respectable, all those kinds of things. The way that you see in the movies, where you introduce a brand new character and have to make them seem super, super important. And so we have this super important duke whose son has been abducted at this priory school. And also, a German teacher went missing or had left the very same morning or night. And the corpulent man that burst into the room is the founder of this school. They've lost 3 days with the inept, careless failings of the local police that were investigating it. It's all the way in North England, and this man is just trying to drum up Holmes. Please, you have to come. This is the most important thing. This is the most important duke. It's his son. He's still missing. And he convinces Sherlock and Holmes, who, again, were busy with the case. This is the second time in a row where they're already involved, not only in one case, but he mentions several cases that are going on that are important. And when the man says that you have to come, Sherlock says, well, it would have to be more important than all of the things that I'm working on. And another element, another way of making this feel really, really important. And we get a great sequence of detective work. The conversations on the way, the conversations that Sherlock has when he meets these aristocratic people that are in the lineage and in the royal line, and people that don't speak to commoners, gaining information, having really astute questions that aren't those strange kind of questions. Why would Sherlock ask that? We'll find out at the end. But instead, really smart questions that a reader can follow along. We're trying to figure out an abduction. So, has anyone written to the child? Who has written to the child? He has a bicycle. What kind of bicycle? Where is the mother? And different questions that makes the reader feel like we're kind of looking at this too. And eventually they find, they decide, first they decide where to start looking. They're not going to go to the west, they're not going to go to the east, the reasons are explained, they're not going to the south, so they must go north. And they come across these bicycle tracks, or one bicycle track, and they're following it, they follow it along, and they lose it, find it again. They find that the bicycle had flipped over. They see that the bicycle righted itself again, off the tracks go again, and we're following along. Then we find the bicycle, and there's a dead man. And it's that German teacher that went missing. And his head is crushed in. And at some point later on, Sherlock and Watson, Sherlock says to Watson, let's go over just exactly what we know, and then try to figure out what is critical, what is accidental, what can we just remove as superfluous. And so they have a single track going through a moor. The bicycle falls over, rights itself. Later on, there's a dead man with his head crushed in. No other bicycle tracks. No other footprints. Just a single track where, and inexplicably, and as Watson points out, impossibly, a man gets whacked in the head. Sherlock mentions, well, if it was a bullet, that could be possible. But Watson says, well, that's impossible. And Sherlock says, right. The way that we're explaining it now means that it is impossible, which means we're still missing information. It's a way of him understanding that there's parts of their story that need to be changed or omitted. It's not the story, and it's a great bit of detective fiction, because as we're reading along and being the reader going like, well, this is really intriguing and mysterious, and then we have the characters agreeing, like there's a piece of the puzzle that's missing. And you read it and go like, yeah, like, I'm part of this conversation. It's great. And Sherlock has a revelation. That moment where he goes, how could I have been so dim-witted? How could I have been so blind? How could I have let this gone? And mentions that along this bicycle track that they had been following, there's been cow hooves, cow tracks, all along, following the same bicycle line. And Sherlock says to Watson, like, you saw those cow tracks. Yeah. Did you see any cows? We were going for miles. See any cows on either side? Like, there's a bicycle track and cow tracks going in one way. What's going on with these cow tracks? And then he figures out, well, the cow is galloping, it's trotting, it's cantering. We have a trotting cow. So Sherlock knows something's going on. They go to this inn. They meet uh, a typical villain. Pretty much wants to throw him out and begrudgingly, angrily concedes bit by bit with um, Sherlock's clever manipulations. Finds out that they have a horse in the stable. They go check out the horse, and uh, if you can see where this is going, they check out um, uh, the, uh, the feet of the horse, and they look at the now I can't remember what they're called, but um, those metal straps that they'll put on the horse's hoof. And later on, one of the surprises, not the big surprise, one of the surprises is that they took made up cow hooves and put them on the horse hooves, so anyone that was looking at the tracks would be thrown off course and think, well, this is nothing to pay attention to. This is a cow, not a horse. Which reminds me of one of my favorite episodes of the Andy Griffith Show. And I believe the name of the episode is The Cow Thief. And so there's a cow thief in Mayberry. The farmers are upset. The mayor is so disappointed that Andy and Barney haven't caught this cow thief that he brings in an outsider expert. And Andy and Barney and the expert and the mayor are all looking at this crime scene where there's the cow the cow prints in the mud, and then the people prints in the mud, and they make a melange, so a plaster cast of the criminal's footprints. And then they're in the deputy's office, the sheriff's office, and the outsider specialist is explaining what happened with the cow thief in Mayberry. The mayor's there listening, and there's a three-person gang. There's a leader of the gang, and then the two other people in the gang. The two other people are these very hugely overweight men, because the impression in the mud is deeper than the first one. Barney's chiming in as this is going on and saying, well, you see, Mayor, the deeper the impression in the mud would come from a larger weight man. Just infuriating the mayor. And Andy's not paying attention. And the mayor even calls over and says, you know, Andy, you need to take this more seriously. Andy has a different idea. So Andy goes off on his own to do his own investigations. The mayor is very happy with the specialist. Of course, Barney, the turncoat, is now just buttering up to the specialist and the mayor. The twist of that story, Andy calls the mayor and the specialist and Barney over to a potential night of burglary at one of the farmers' houses. He set up a trap. So Andy has all the footprints laid out that they made in the melange. He says, look at this. And they all look at it and go, yeah, we were all looking at this. And Andy says, do you see anything that's missing? And they all say no. And he says, well, there's no cow prints. And so they say, do you mean to suggest that someone put boots on a cow? And he says, that's what I think. And they all go, well, that's ridiculous. Then you get one of the best, funniest visual images of a cow thief coming out of a barn with a cow on this leash, and the cow wearing these boots. And it's just a cow walking with these boots. And so Andy was right. I couldn't not make that reference. And there's a good chance that someone, one of the writers of the Andy Griffith Show, was reading, had read this story and used it as inspiration. I don't know. I think the episode is called "The Cow Thief." And for a story that was so exciting and present, that there's really high stakes. It's something very serious. Sherlock is taking it serious. We don't get any silly, flamboyant antics. It's as Sherlock would say, no time to waste, and the game is afoot. It still has a very nice surprise at the end, a resolution that brings everything together, shows Sherlock is the smartest person in the room, and it has a great ending. It really does have a satisfying, surprising, little bit of a twist ending and how it comes together. For whatever reason, I'm deciding to be a little vague with how it wraps up, but it was good. It was. I appreciate that these short stories can have shifts. Some can be a little bit smaller, some can be a little bit bigger, some can be very funny. Sometimes Sherlock can be extremely eccentric, go high society, and walk-ins that are just people that are poor. It keeps it it keeps us a spice and variety in stories that are boiled down a very rigid structure. Someone walks into a room, we have the case, Sherlock solves it. But reading them so quickly, recognizing that structure, there's still a lot of play in adding elements that make reading fun. Whether it is going to be dramatic and big, or intimate and small scale, things like that. So I enjoyed it. It was the adventure of the Priory School, also a little bit of the Andy Griffith Show. So let me know if you've read it or seen that episode. I'd love to hear that. But let me know if you've read it, and thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like. Thank you and take care.